Valerie was not Eddie's wife anymore, had not been for 13 years. Yet when doctors said the end was near, Valerie Bertinelli drove straight to the hospital and took Eddie Van Halen's hand. For over 2 decades, she had loved him through the chaos of his genius, walked away, and then walked back in when it mattered most. As Eddie took his final breath alongside their son, Wolfgang, his last words to them were just 3 syllables: "I love you." For years, Valerie protected the silence of that room. Now, she is breaking it. What she is revealing changes everything you thought you knew about their tragic love story. This is the truth behind Eddie Van Halen's final moments.
Always wins, no matter what. Even when they're gone, there's still that love there to be grateful for that you had.
The silence that spoke volumes.
The legendary guitarist and co-founder of Van Halen has died.
She was still married to someone else when she got the call. Tom Vitale, her second husband. The man she had built a quiet, settled life with, while Eddie Van Halen slowly disappeared into hospitals. He got locked in on treatments in a body that was losing a war it had been fighting for years. And yet, when the moment came, the real moment, it was not Tom's hand she was holding, it was Eddie's. She was in that room, with their son, Wolfgang, at the end of everything. She wrote about it on Instagram that same day. 40 years ago, she said, her life changed forever when she met him. She said he gave her the one true light in her life, their son, Wolfgang. And through all his challenging treatments for lung cancer, he kept his gorgeous spirit and that impish grin. And then she went quiet. Not all at once, but almost. And that quiet became one of the most compelling mysteries in the entire story of Eddie Van Halen's final chapter. October 6th, 2020, the news broke the way all great losses break. Suddenly. Completely. Like the world simply stopped turning for a moment and forgot to start again. Eddie Van Halen was gone, 65 years old, dead from cancer. The music world collapsed in real time. Former Van Halen lead singers David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar were among the first to respond. Hagar wrote that he was heartbroken and speechless. Billy Idol called Eddie a guitar god and a genuinely beautiful soul, legends, icons. People who had shared stages and studios and decades with the man. All of them reached for words that could not quite hold the weight of what they were feeling. And in the middle of all of it stood Valerie Bertinelli, the former wife, the mother of his only child. A woman who existed in a category that grief had no clean language for. She posted. She said what she needed to say in that first raw moment. She wrote that she was so grateful Wolfie and I were able to hold him in his last moments. She said she would see him in their next life. Those words landed hard, because they were not the words of a woman who had simply moved on. They were not the polished statement of a public figure managing a difficult situation. They were the words of someone who loved him, still, in a way that a divorce decree cannot dissolve and a decade of separation cannot erase. And then the internet did what it always does. It got complicated. Some people responded to her tribute by claiming she should have kept quiet as his former wife and was perhaps taking attention from his widow. Some thought her public mourning was just an attention-seeking gimmick. There it was, the quiet cruelty of public grief, the unwritten rule that says former wives do not get to mourn publicly. That a divorce certificate is also a permission slip. It can revoke the right to feel things loudly, in full view, without justification. Valerie Bertinelli did not respond to those critics directly. She did not defend herself. Also, she did not explain the complexity of what 26 years of marriage and co-parenting and intermittent reconciliation actually feels like from the inside. She just went quieter. 3 months later, she returned to television for the first time. A cooking segment, safe, controlled, the kind of appearance a publicist schedules when a client needs to re-enter public life gently. When Hoda Kotb asked how she was doing, Bertinelli teared up immediately. She said she did not know why she was crying. She said it had been rough, very bittersweet. Rough. That one word did more work than 100 prepared statements. Because rough is not the word of a woman who had processed her grief cleanly and moved on. Rough is the word of someone still in the middle of something, still finding the shape of a loss that does not fit any standard template. Then came February of 2021, another television appearance, and this time, something slipped through. She told Today that grief shame was something she never thought would happen to her. She said she did not want to talk about it right then, but she acknowledged that she had known the man for 40 years, that she was 20 years old when she met him, that she still loved him. Grief shame, two words that stopped a lot of people cold, because they named something real, something millions of people who had lost someone complicated, a former lover, an estranged parent, and a person they had a history with, but not a clean present had felt and never had a word for. You are not supposed to grieve loudly for people who are no longer yours. Society does not build space for that kind of mourning. There are no bereavement days at work for former husbands, no casseroles dropped at the door, no acknowledged place at the funeral, just the grief, sitting there, with nowhere official to go. And yet, Valerie Bertinelli kept carrying it, in the Instagram posts that came quietly, months and years after the death, in the moments on talk shows where her eyes went somewhere private before she pulled herself back, in the way she talked about Wolfgang, always with Eddie just beneath the surface, visible in the way a parent sees the other parent in the child's face. Nearly 5 years after his death, she posted a black and white photo of the two of them embracing, smiling at the camera. The caption was simple, "Some days I really do miss you." She added that there will always be a loud absence in these gratifying sideline years. And she asked a question that hit harder than she may have intended. Who do I talk to when there was really only one person I could talk to about Wolfie the way that we did? That question, read it again. Who do I talk to after everything? After the divorce, the second marriage, years of distance, and the public narratives about moving on and healing and new chapters. After all of it, there was still only one person she could talk to about their son the way she needed to. And he was gone. That is the core of this entire story. Not the details of Eddie's final days, not the medical timeline or the hospital room logistics or the celebrity tributes that flooded social media. The core is this. Valerie Bertinelli loved Eddie Van Halen in a way that outlasted the marriage, in a way that survived the divorce and the bitterness and the second marriages and the long, complicated middle years. And when he died, she was left holding a grief that the world did not have a proper category for. So she carried it quietly, until she was ready to put it down. And what she said when she finally did, what she revealed about his last days, his last words, and what passed between them in that hospital room, changed the way a lot of people understood both of them. The marriage, the music, and the mayhem.
We ended up looking like twins for the longest time.
By the way, that's what love does. You like imprint and start dressing alike.
She had never even heard of Van Halen. That is the part of this story most people do not know. When Valerie Bertinelli's brothers asked her to come backstage at a concert in Shreveport, Louisiana in the summer of 1980, she was not a fan. She was not following the band. She did not know their songs. She looked at a cassette tape of the band before the show and saw a photo of the guitar player. Her exact words years later were simple. "That guitar player's really cute." That was it. That was the whole reason she went. She was 20 years old, a television star, America's sweetheart. The girl next door from one of the biggest sitcoms on TV. He was 25, wild, brilliant, already being called the greatest guitar player of his generation. And neither of them had any idea what they were walking into. They went back to the hotel after the show. They talked. They hung out by the outdoor pool. He was shy, quiet, not what she expected at all. When the band left town, he promised to call. He didn't call for 3 days. She was getting anxious. When he finally did, she didn't hesitate. She told him to move in with her. He did. 8 months later, they were married. 8 months. That is the entire courtship. From a backstage introduction to a wedding ring in less than a year. She was barely 21. He was 26. Years later, Bertinelli would look back and say they got married far too young. But she also said she didn't know how else they would have done it, because the feeling was real. Nobody who watched them in those early years could question that. The chemistry was undeniable. The love was visible, loud, combustible. The problem was everything that came with it. Hollywood called them the ultimate odd couple from day one. On one side was Bertinelli, one of television's most beloved stars, having portrayed teenager Barbara Cooper on the hit TV comedy One Day at a Time. Since the series premiere in 1975, when she was just 15 years old. On the other was Eddie Van Halen, taking the rock world apart with his bare hands. The good girl and the guitar god, It made for great headlines, great photos, great copy. What it made for privately was something considerably more complicated. The 80s arrived, and with them, everything that decade was infamous for. Cocaine was everywhere and easy to get. Bertinelli later admitted she partook as well for a few years, until she just couldn't take it anymore. She said it took her years before she could enjoy a sunrise and hear birds chirping again. Read that sentence. A woman who played America's wholesome teenager on national television, saying she spent years of her marriage in a fog so thick she could not enjoy a morning. That is not a cautionary tale, it is a confession. And it took courage to make it, because it complicated the public narrative, the one that painted Eddie as the troubled one, and Valerie as the steady presence trying to hold everything together. The truth was messier than that. It always is. They went through a lot in those first 10 years, basically the entire 1980s, which Bertinelli later said she didn't remember too much of between the drugs and the alcohol. They waited 10 years to have Wolfgang, 10 years of a marriage already straining under the weight of everything they were both carrying. Wolfgang arrived in 1991, and for a time, his birth gave the marriage new oxygen. But oxygen only helps if the foundation is solid, and the foundation of Eddie and Valerie's marriage had cracks running through it that neither of them had ever properly addressed. The infidelity came. On both sides, it is documented, it is something Bertinelli has now spoken about directly. In May of 2024, watching her son Wolfgang's Behind the Music documentary, Bertinelli finally said it plainly. She said she fell in love with Eddie when she was 20, and it rapidly declined into drugs and alcohol and infidelity. Nothing that makes you feel loved and wanted and cared for. Nothing that would scream soulmate. Soulmate. That word is important, because for years, the story had been told that way. The great love story, the rock star and the actress. Two people who belonged together, who never stopped loving each other even after the divorce. And Valerie Bertinelli finally drew a line through that narrative. With her own hand, she admitted that after Eddie died, she was more than willing to put herself in the grieving widow category for a man she hadn't lived with for 20 years. That is brutal honesty, about herself, about grief, and the way we reconstruct love stories after someone is gone, smoothing out the rough edges, softening the damage, and making it beautiful in hindsight, because beauty is easier to carry than truth. They separated in 2001. The divorce was finalized in 2007. 26 years from meeting to the final legal signature. But here is what most people miss when they hear those numbers. The separation did not end the relationship. It changed its shape, fundamentally, permanently, but it did not sever the connection. Both of them remarried. Eddie to Janie Lisevsky, Valerie to Tom Vitale. And yet they remained in each other's lives, closely, regularly, because of Wolfgang. Always because of Wolfgang. Wolfgang was the bridge, the living, breathing proof that something real had existed between them, something that could not be dissolved by lawyers or decades of distance. Bertinelli said that near the end of Eddie's life, she could be much more compassionate. She acknowledged that neither of them had fully dealt with their past traumas at the time of the marriage. Near the end of his life. That phrase does a lot of work. It implies a journey, a long, winding, painful journey from the people they were, at 20 and 26, to the people they eventually became. People who could sit with each other's complexity, who could hold the whole of a relationship, the love, damage, years of silence, and the slow path back to something gentler without flinching. In a March 2026 podcast interview, Bertinelli said she regrets not fully understanding Eddie's trauma during the marriage. She said the frustration of wanting him to get well combined with her not being mature enough to know how to deal with it was something she now looked back on with sorrow. Not anger, not bitterness. Sorrow. That distinction matters enormously, because sorrow implies understanding. It implies a woman who spent years after the divorce and death working backwards through a complicated love story and arriving at something like compassion for him and for herself. What they had was not a fairy tale. It was something harder and stranger and ultimately more interesting than that. Two people who found each other too young, got swept up in a life neither of them was prepared for. They made serious mistakes on both sides, and somehow, slowly, imperfectly, over decades, found their way back to something they could both live with. A source close to both of them said it simply after Eddie died. Valerie and Eddie had some rough times, but their love for each other never wavered, hurt, or failed. Not ever caused real damage. That is a specific and important distinction, and it goes a long way toward explaining why Valerie Bertinelli was standing in that hospital room on October 6th, 2020. Not as a former wife fulfilling an obligation, as someone who had never fully left. The last years, what she witnessed. It was Thanksgiving Day, 2019. Eddie Van Halen showed up at her house, driven over by his friend George Lopez, looking thinner than she remembered, moving differently, the way sick people move when they are working hard to hide it. He ate with the family, laughed when the moment called for it, did what he always did in a room full of people, and then, quietly, he asked to speak to Valerie alone. They found a car, George Lopez's car, parked outside. Two people who had been married for over 2 decades, who had shared a child and a life and 1,000 complicated moments, sitting inches apart in the front seat of someone else's vehicle. And Eddie Van Halen started to cry. He had seen a gold bar in Germany while receiving cancer treatments and immediately thought of her. He handed her a small bag. Inside was a pendant-sized gold bar. And then he said it. He told her he hoped she didn't think it was weird that he bought his former wife a gift and didn't get his wife anything. Then he said simply, "I just love you." That sentence, in a parked car, on Thanksgiving, from a man who was already running out of time. They sat in that car for nearly an hour, inches apart, opening their hearts to each other, sharing their feelings about the relationship from the very beginning to the present. He wanted her to know he had messed up. She admitted she had contributed to their troubles too. They laughed, they wept, they confessed failures and fears. And at the end of it, she wrote, nothing was left between them but love and Eddie's smile. That conversation happened less than a year before he died, and it matters enormously to understand everything that follows, because it was not just a farewell. It was something rarer and harder. It was two people who had genuinely hurt each other across decades, finally sitting still long enough to say what they had never been able to say inside the marriage. I'm sorry. I see you. I love you, not romantically, not as a rekindling of something, but as the truest possible version of the thing they had always been to each other, stripped of the performance and the pain. To understand why that Thanksgiving conversation meant what it meant, you have to understand what those final years looked like for Eddie Van Halen. The cancer had not arrived suddenly. It had been building for 2 decades. His initial cancer diagnosis came in 2000. While he publicly speculated that the tongue cancer began from regularly holding brass and copper guitar picks in his mouth while playing, there was no solid evidence to support that. His heavy tobacco and alcohol use were the more likely culprits. He fought it, quietly, privately. The way Eddie Van Halen did almost everything intensely on his own terms, keeping the details away from the public as long as he possibly could. But by 2017, the fight had escalated to a level that could no longer be quietly managed. Wolfgang later revealed in an interview that toward the end of 2017, his father was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. The doctors gave him 6 weeks. He then went to Germany to receive treatment. Wolfgang said whatever they did there was amazing because he got 3 more years with his father, 6 weeks. The doctors gave him 6 weeks, and Eddie Van Halen lived for 3 more years. That tells you something about the man, his stubbornness, his refusal to accept a ceiling. The same energy that made him the greatest guitar player of his generation applied, in the end, to his own survival. But the body has limits that stubbornness cannot override. In early 2019, things took a turn for the worse when Eddie got into a motorcycle accident. He was later diagnosed with a brain tumor and received gamma knife radiosurgery to treat it. As Wolfgang described it, shit kept stacking up and stacking up. Throat cancer, lung cancer, a brain tumor, a motorcycle accident, and through all of it, Valerie Bertinelli was watching. Not from a distance, not from behind a screen, up close, involved, because Wolfgang was in the middle of all of it. And wherever Wolfgang was, both his parents were present in ways that mattered. When Eddie told Valerie that his cancer had spread to his brain, she stared at him, shocked, feeling herself go numb. Her exact words, later written in her memoir, were these: "I can't imagine being without him." That sentence is everything. Not, "I can't imagine Wolfgang losing his father," Or, I can't imagine the world without this musician. But I can't imagine being without him. Personal, raw. The truth of a woman who had divorced this man 13 years earlier and still could not picture a world in which he simply was not there anymore. The final week and a half arrived. For the last week and a half of Eddie's life, Valerie and Wolfgang took turns spending as much time as they could at the hospital. She was there every day, not alone. This is important to understand and respect. In his final weeks, Bertinelli and Wolfgang were with him in the hospital every day. They were there along with his second wife, Janie Lazewski, and his brother and bandmate drummer, Alex Van Halen. All of them together. In that room, former wife, current wife, brother, son, the full, complicated, beautiful mess of a life that Eddie Van Halen had built across 65 years. And nobody fought. Nobody claimed territory. They were all just there, for him. It was in those hospital days that the moment Valerie had been moving toward for years finally arrived. They were together, crying. And she said something she had never said aloud before. Not in those words, not with that specific meaning. She recalled saying to him through tears just days before his death, "Maybe next time, right? Maybe next time we'll get it right. Maybe next time." Think about what it takes to say that to someone. The grief inside those 3 words, the acknowledgement that this time had been imperfect, that there had been damage, that the damage was real, and yet the belief, or the hope, or the prayer that somewhere beyond the end of this particular story, there was another version where they got it right. That is not the language of 2 people who simply shared a child. That is the language of 2 people who never fully let go of something neither of them could fully name. Tuesday morning, October 6th, 2020. Wolfie called her. He told her Eddie's breathing had changed. She had to get to the hospital immediately. She went. Her final words to him as he was taking his last breath were, "I love you. I love you," were the last words Eddie said to Wolfgang and to Valerie. And they were the last words she and Wolfgang said to him before he stopped breathing. The room went quiet. And then something unexpected happened. Something that tells you more about who Valerie Bertinelli and Eddie Van Halen were together than any of the headlines, the tributes, or the magazine covers. After 20 minutes of silence, they started sharing stories about him. And they began laughing, not crying, all of them cracking up. She wrote that they laughed and that it was so much better than crying. Laughing in a hospital room. 20 minutes after the greatest guitar player who ever lived took his last breath. Because that is who he was. He was someone who made people laugh even in the worst moments. Someone whose spirit was so loud that even his absence could not immediately silence it. In her most recent memoir, released in 2026, Valerie wrote about him with tenderness. A kind of tenderness that stripped away every complicated layer of their history. She wrote that it still breaks her heart that he ran out of time. Because he was so there. He so wanted to be the right person, the good person that he already was. His heart was always pure, from the woman who knew the full truth of him, the genius and the chaos and the damage and the apology on Thanksgiving, and the gold bar from Germany, and the final, "I love you," the whole of it. And her verdict, after all of it, was that his heart was pure. She was not just a former wife grieving a famous man. She was the person who had loved Eddie Van Halen since she was 20 years old, who had stayed connected to him through divorce, distance, second marriages, cancer, brain tumors, and a motorcycle accident, who sat in that hospital room in the final hours because there was nowhere else on earth she was supposed to be. And the question that had been quietly building since the night he died was, what did she really know about those last days? About what passed between them, and the truth of what they were to each other at the end was finally beginning to find its answer, in her own words, on her own timeline. Breaking the silence, and what it cost her. She did not plan to say any of it. She had intended Getting Naked to be a book about teaching people how to love themselves. She did not know she would go as far as she did, but something about putting words on a page does what years of television appearances cannot. It pulls the truth out of you, not the polished version, or the grief that sounds acceptable in a 3-minute segment, but the real version. And so Valerie Bertinelli went there. The memoir described childhood traumas she finally needed to dig into, dealing with self-loathing at this age, giving up alcohol at the same time, which made all her feelings raw. She realized she had to deal with her feelings. Sobriety has a way of doing that. of removing the distance between yourself and everything you spent years softening. And in that raw, clear-eyed state, Eddie Van Halen kept appearing on the page, not as a legend, not as a cautionary tale, as a man she had loved imperfectly, lost slowly, and never completely released. She wrote that he spent his final year making amends to the people in his life. Making amends. That is not a small thing. It is a man in his last year on earth choosing to do the hardest work there is, looking at the people he had hurt and saying so, directly, without deflection. She also recalled hearing that Eddie had said letting her go was his biggest mistake. His biggest mistake, after everything, the drugs, infidelity, and the years of chaos. He arrived at the end of his life and landed on that as his biggest regret. Not the career choices, band drama, or the decades of substance abuse. Letting her go. Her final words to him as he was taking his last breath were, "I love you." She wrote that it still breaks her heart that he ran out of time. Because he was so there. He so wanted to be the right person. The good person that he already was. His heart was always pure. He was such a good man. A good man. Said by the woman who watched him be a difficult one for decades, who lived inside the chaos, who divorced him, who still showed up. That verdict means everything precisely because of who is delivering it. She was 20 years old when she met him, and she was 60 when she held his hand for the last time. 40 years, and not one of them is simple. Valerie Bertinelli did not speak for years because she was not ready. Because grief without a clean category needs time, and some love stories are too complicated to summarize in a statement. But when she finally found the words, they were worth the wait. She told us his heart was pure, that he ran out of time, that she would see him in their next life, and that is the truest, most human ending this story could have. If this moved you, leave a comment below. Tell us what Eddie Van Halen meant to you. Subscribe for more stories told the way they deserve to be told.